Shabbos, everyone. Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos. I'm excited for this particular Shabbat because today is Friday, March 28th, and it is also the 28th of the month of Adar. Tomorrow, the 29th of Adar is the last day of Adar. So Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the month in which Pesach falls, begins tomorrow night. So I'm excited for this month because I love Pesach and I love getting ready for Pesach. Wanted to tell you that our beautiful Willamette River is flowing at 69,100 cubic feet per second, which is still on the very high side right now. Earlier this week, in the first part of the week, it got up to well over 70,000 cubic feet per second. Um, so it's exciting. High waters right now, and that's beautiful and exciting. The moon is at 0% right now. It is not visible because it is now completely um, on the same side as the sun. So there you can't actually see the moon at this time. So the sliver of the moon will appear tomorrow night, and that is the beginning of the Hebrew month of Nisan. Also, this month in Nisan, there's a mitzvah that you can only do in Nisan besides Pesach, which is blessing flowering fruit trees. So, so I'm excited to do the mitzvot of Nisan. In the sky tonight, our friends Jupiter, Venus, and Mars are still up. The moon is not visible. In the sky too, very similar to last week, and it's because it's a seasonal thing, is Orion, Gemini, Scorpius, and the Big Dipper of the one and Scorpio, if you know those ones. Um, Big signs of spring for me right now are that my bees are flying like crazy on the warm days, and they're bringing in a very light colored, like a white colored pollen, and also a deep but still kind of dull colored orange pollen. I haven't figured out what they're getting to yet, but those are the colors of pollen they're bringing in right now. And the parasha of the week is Pekudei, which is the last parasha of the book of Shemot, going into the book of Vayikra. So the verses I wanted to share are at the very end of the this week's parasha in chapter 40, and they are here. Vayasem et hakior ben ohel moed uven hamizbeach v'yiten sham mayim lerachza. As the Mishkan was being erected, for the first time, Moshe placed the laver, the kior, the laver, between the tent of the meeting and the altar and put water in it for blessing. So, really, kind of the first piece of sacred furniture of the Mishkan was in the courtyard. When you entered into the courtyard, you would see the laver. ורחצו ממנו משה ואהרון ובניו את ידיהם ואת רגליהם. And from it, Moshe and Aaron and Aaron's sons would wash their hands and feet. So this mitzvah, which was in the Torah strictly commanded to the priests, is now connected to a practice that all Jews do, which is that the practice is to wash our hands before we eat, well, specifically to wash our hands and make a blessing before we eat a meal with bread. On Pesach, we wash our hands before we eat karpas, but that's not bread, so we don't make a blessing. When we get to the point where we're going to eat the matzah, we say hamotzi lechem min haaretz after we wash our hands with the bracha, with the blessing. So I wanted to talk about where this practice comes from and kind of how it looks when you do it. So the Mishnah, which is a text that records and stores many of these oral traditions that had existed from, say, the third century Common Era up to the second century, before the Common Era, up to the second century of the Common Era, um, makes the following observation. It says, regarding teruma, regarding Truma, which is one of the offerings that is given to the priestly family to sustain them. Um, one of the Truma requires the washing of the hands, requires the washing of the hands. So Ut'onin richitzat yadayim. So it requires the washing of the hands. And in fact, if the priests do not wash their hands and touch the offerings, having not purified their hands, they transmit impurity to the entire offering, and it can no longer, it's now polluted. So this is where this where this mission where this law is at the time of the Mishnah. However, at this around the same time, the earliest reference we have to the custom of washing hands, which is not a biblical commandment, that is to say, not washing the hands on the part of every Israelite before food, is not a biblical commandment. It's a rabbinical commandment. The earliest record we have of this is actually from the Christian Gospels, where there's a conversation between, I think it's a conversation between Jesus and the Pharisees about the practice of washing the hands. So we know this is a very ancient practice that is older than the Mishnah, that Jews had a ritual way of washing their hands. And we'll see in a moment the way we understand that it's not about cleaning your hands. That's a different process. It's about purifying your hands. Okay, so then the the Talmud Bavli, the Babylonian Talmud, which comes after the Mishnah and really can be understood as commentaries upon the Mishnah, in Chagiga 27a, it says this powerful thing that says, Bizman shebeit hamikdash kayam, mizbeach mechaper al adam. When the temple was standing, which is already hundreds and hundreds of years after the Mishkan was standing, from which the mitzvah we originally saw was about in the Mishkan, the temple was built hundreds of years after that. The first temple was destroyed. It was rebuilt. The second temple was destroyed. They're talking about when the second temple was destroyed, Jews lost the ability to attain atonement through the altar. The altar no longer existed. So, but then the Talmud continues and says, Achshav, now, which is to say, after the temple was destroyed, Shulchano shel Adam mechaper alav. It is a person's table that atones for him. It is your table that atones for you. This is the source text of this beautiful, powerful idea that one of the reasons that Judaism thrived, even after the destruction of the temple and the beginning of Galut, the diaspora, was because the sanctity and the centrality of the tradition, um, the sanctified center of the tradition moved from the temple to the home, to the home. So what that means now is that your table stands in the place of the altar. So when we eat, when we have guests over, when we sit down to eat, and along with the words of Torah that are spoken at the table, we are doing something holy on the level or compared to what the priests used to do inside the temple and inside the Mishkan. And already in the Talmud, which is well over 1,000 years old, probably closer to 1,100, 1,300 years old, the Talmud already has the process of, before you eat a meal with bread, you go, you wash your hands, you make the blessing over washing your hands, and then you return to the table, make the blessing over the bread, and begin the meal. Now, you're actually blessing the whole meal via the bread, but you're making the blessing over the whole meal with the bread as the center, and you take a bite of bread, and then you begin the meal. So this is already spoken of and in early texts, and by the medieval period, you have the Sefer HaChinuch writing in a very clear way. Kol Yisrael tzarich litol yadav kodem achilat pat b'mayim haruim. All Jews, all of Israel, needs to wash their hands before the eating of bread with fitting water, with good clean water. Um, by the way, the technical phrase means to lift the hands. Okay, so it doesn't actually mean say rechitzat yadayim. In the blessing, it says nitilat yadayim, which means lifting up upward of the hands. So, and then the Sefer HaChinuch continues when the person continues to recite the blessing on the washing of the hands. Then you recite the blessing over eating of the bread at the beginning, and then you can begin the meal. So sharing all of that with you just because this practice is very, very ancient in our tradition. The Shulchan Aruch and the Rambam are all want to make it very clear that this washing is not about cleaning your hands. It's about purifying your hands. It is a ritual, not a cleaning process. So the Shulchan Aruch says, Afilu eno yodea lahem shum tum'ah. Even if you know there's nothing on your hands, even if you know your hands are clean, you should still do the ritual washing of the hands. And the Rambam similarly says the same thing. ואף על פי שהיא פת חולין, ואף על פי שאין ידיו מלוכלכות, ואינו יודע להם טומאה, לא יאכל עד שיטול שתי ידיו. Although a person's hands are not dirty, nor are you aware that they have contracted any type of ritual impurity, you should not eat until you wash your hands. So to reiterate the evolution of this, there's a commandment in the Torah for the sons of Aaron to wash their hands and their feet, wash their hands before going in to perform the service of the temple. And there is also a a rabbinic or a mishnaic or ancient tradition that the priests had to wash their hands before they touched the offerings that were given to them by the Israelites. Otherwise, they would actually transfer impurity to the food and it would become, the whole thing would become polluted. So it was a very severe and important thing to do for the priests to wash their hands. Once the temple is destroyed, the sanctity, this is the sanctified center of Judaism moves from the temple to the home. Now your table has become the altar, and how you conduct yourself at the table is a holy act, is a sacred ceremony, some ceremonial act. So now it's all Jews are required to wash their hands before they go eat a meal, a full meal, which is it's only a full meal in Judaism if it has bread involved. Um, you wash your hands before you eat a meal with bread, um, with as a memory as a reminder of the fact that the priests had to wash their hands before they touched an offering, and then you go sit down at your altar with the food that's eaten there, with the blessings that are made, with the talk of Torah that happens at the table. That is a sanctuary. So in the ideal situation, you would stand up from the table before you begin to eat, and you would go to your sink and fill up a vessel. Um, has to have, of course, it's Judaism, there's rules for everything. It has to be enough water in the vessel to cover both hands. And then there's different practices, but you pour the water over your hands, making sure it covers your hands as best as you can, but it at least has to go up to there. Um, Cover the hands, and then you rub your hands together a little bit and hold them up in front of you. Make the blessing over washing the hands, or literally the lifting up of the hands. Then you dry your hands. The tradition is that between the washing of the hands and the blessing of the bread, and actually really other than the blessing, it's actually wait until you're actually eating. No words are spoken. It's a little bit complicated as to why that's the case, but it's a precious moment because it is a moment at the beginning of the Shabbat meal that everyone can be silent together. So after everyone has washed their hands, there's just this moment of quiet, of expectation, of inviting in and feeling the preciousness of that holy moment of eating together and being together, and anticipation of the words of Torah that are going to be spoken at the table. And then the blessing is made by one person. And then everyone takes a bite of the bread, and then the conversation and the meal begins. So, um, want to wish everyone a good Shabbos. I'm excited for Shabbat in the home tonight. I hope those who are participating have a wonderful Shabbat, and I hope everyone, whether you're at Shabbat in the home or not, has a beautiful and restful Shabbos. So Chodesh Tov to everyone. A good month. Looking forward to the month of Nisan.